I'm Sy Lewis, and this is Sy's Green Scene. Welcome to Sy's Green Scene. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today. Together, we'll dive into the world of renewable energy, exploring the latest advancements, eco-friendly practices, and the incredible individuals shaping a sustainable tomorrow. So get ready to be inspired and empowered to positively impact your planet. Today's special guest is Dr. Sharon Waller. It's so good to have you here. Thank you so very much. So Dr. Waller is so many things to so many people. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start out by asking Dr. Waller if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Well, first of all, Sy, thank you for inviting me, and please call me Sharon. Okay. I am an environmental engineer licensed in the state of Illinois. I'm also a small business owner. I'm active in my community and my kids' schools. And I also recently won the election, the primary for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District Commissioner, and will be running again in November. So I have to ask you to please do vote and push all the way down to the bottom of that ballot and vote for the local offices.
Most certainly. The Water Reclamation District is really important to the environment in our water systems in Chicago, and it has a lot to do with sustainability. So can you tell us a little bit about your roles as an environmental engineer?
Sure. So environmental engineering is pollution control. And you can kind of, it's in the house of civil engineering if you go to college and study that particular major. And then within environmental engineering, there's air, land, and water. And I have practiced my 30-year career in water. Water can be further divided into drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and then water reuse is actually recognizing that all those are one water. So I had the great privilege to work for the state of California on a water reuse project, and that gave me some language to reassess what I don't see here in the Midwest, and specifically Illinois. And then I additionally always knew, even in college, that to make advancements in environmental conservation and sustainability requires politics.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know that your seat that you're running for the Water Reclamation District, it was really important to get you to this point for November. How do those roles intersect with sustainability? So your role as an environmental engineer, your role as a candidate for the Water Reclamation District, and then I would like to throw this in, and then your role as a citizen and a parent in clean water.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually taught college level courses for 3 years at Northwestern, and it was really surprising to me to see the difference in how the textbooks had evolved since I did my bachelor's degree back in the 90s. And it is very much about sustainability now, talking about sustainable yield, but then also if I went back and taught again today, I bet those books would be revised again to talk about extreme weather and what we can expect from our aging infrastructure that may not have been designed to meet these extreme floods that we are seeing. And how can we think about it in a more creative way? Like if you were to just re-envision the world, what would you be designing today for an unknown future that's probably going to have more extreme weather, rather than just trying to put Band-Aids on our existing infrastructure? So I love to envision the goal, no matter what that goal should be, and then start from where you are today, and then you work from where you are now, but you always have this like North Star of guiding you about what is the goal. The goal is less floodwater in people's basements, less pollution in the being discharged, water sustainability. That may sound crazy here in Lake Michigan area, but if you just go steps outside of Cook County, they're on groundwater, and that aquifer is depleting.
I think that it's really important that you mention that. Yes, we have a lot of lake water around us. This is not drinking water. this is really, a lot of it is not even swimming water. And so how we clean our water is really important. The Water Reclamation District, of course, handles all of the water systems here in Chicago. And I don't know how far of the state, but I know that it does in Chicago. We have recently had multiple cases of flooding, which is always an issue to our community. I think it was last year, the West Side flooded enormously, and as well as, parts of the South Side and other parts of the city. I know Chatham had a lot of flooding. So how does water reclamation deal with that water? Where does that water go? It's like once the water comes in from the rain, it's not going somewhere, which is why it's going in our basements. And a lot of people don't understand where it's going. They're just assuming that, the sewer on the block is flooded and that's why it's going into our homes. But I know that that is actually not the case. It's not just the case. There's so much water coming in at one time. So if you could just speak to that a bit, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So in an engineered system, you have a pipe, and that is a fixed volume, right? So if you were to just let that water run over land, it could expand in volume, right? So in a floodplain, the water just keeps on expanding up the bank until it has enough room to kind of get past, and then you have increased velocities. But in a pipe situation, you can really get a bottleneck. And MWRD, you can think about the infrastructure as kind of the wraparound of the municipal infrastructures. It has to get through that municipal infrastructure before it gets to MWRD. So even though they designed in the 70s something that they call the Tunnel and Reservoir Project, I call it the Deep Tunnel because I grew up on the Deep Tunnel in the Evanston-Skokie area where we had flooding in our basement, which we counted by the number of steps covered when I was in kindergarten. But that deep tunnel can't receive the water if the local sewers are not improved. So you can kind of look to see what municipalities have done sewer improvements and what their flooding outcomes are versus the municipalities that haven't done improvements.
Okay.
The happy news is that we have a lot of state and federal funding right now. So it could be a pleasant conversation with your mayor to ask them, hey, we do have some state and federal funding, and I might like to have the sewers on my block increased in volume so that I don't have that water in my basement again.
I hear this very clearly. I'm going to ask Sharon to say it again because it's something that we discuss here all the time, how we have to advocate for the sustainability of our communities. So if you're flooding in your communities, this is where, you as a constituent, you as a resident, you advocate for yourself. There are state and federal dollars. This is something that could be put toward what will make an impactful measure in the way that you're living in your home if you know that you're not going to be flooded. So if the sewers need to be repaired, replaced. So if you could just make that comment one more time.
Right. So you can increase your sewer capacity. You can also try to take as much rainwater off your local sewers. So to make it a priority to increase funding, and that even if the municipality doesn't have the budget to do that, they can hire a local engineering firm to apply for state and federal funding. Some municipalities may not have staff. They may not have a village engineer with time on their hands to write these proposals, but they can ask an outside firm to do that. So one thing that I did I live in Chicago on a postage stamp property, where increasing the sewer capacity wasn't something that we particularly looked at, but I did have a downspout feeding our sewer very close to our foundation. So when we moved in, I disconnected all the downspouts and I put in a permeable paving patio recently that is about 3 feet down. We took out all the old super hard Chicago clay and backfilled that with drainage pipe, hollowed landscaping permeable drainage pipe and rocks, and then just the least expensive Menards pavers. And so that's about 1,000 gallons of storage that I have in my backyard now. So we completely stopped any basement backups from the drains. I still have a little bit of seepage because it's a 100-year-old house, and that's just something they have to keep after with crack repairs. And another thing that we can be doing is to take advantage of new developments, especially along the river. So the river is where it's backflowing, and it'll backflow into the river before it backflows into Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water source. So we have a lock system that prevents all these sewer backups from impacting our water source. But every once a year on average, those floodwaters get to be so extreme that they have to open the locks and let that untreated raw sewage into our drinking water supply. And that's still happening today. And it's anticipated to increase with the increases in extreme weather that were forecasted.
So with the increase, we already know that we are dealing with climate issues. Chicago had one of the warmest winters on record. We are projected to have a very warm summer. Right now, we've had a lot of rainy days, but if you'll remember last summer, it was a lot of drought. The grass suffered, So I say that to say that, everything is flexible in terms of changing. What can be consistent is us asking for some changes to be made to the infrastructure so that raw sewage is not seeping into our drinking water. And it's not that, things won't get clean, but do you ever want to hear the words that raw sewage is seeping into the drinking water? I think that this is one of the things that makes it so important when we are looking at these seats. I just maybe less than a decade ago started really keeping an eye on what is it exactly that the Water Reclamation District, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District does, and how I used to at one point, it's like, oh, I don't know what these people do, so I'm not going to vote here. And then understanding just how important it is. We talk about lead in the water. Okay, so if these issues are going to be addressed, this is the organization that's going to address them. This is the city. This is a part of the city government that's going to address it. Who we put in these seats is really important, and what they know is very important. So I personally don't want to see a novice who has no idea about environmental engineering or the environment and water saying, well, this is okay, when we know it's not. So can you tell us a little bit more just about the seat and, what it means to have, that position with the Water Reclamation District?
Well, I definitely think that the commissioners have an opportunity for public education, but a particular advantage of having somebody who's in the water industry, a water professional or an environmental engineer, I'm both, in that seat is because all water is my business, right? So you mentioned lead service lines. That's actually not the business of the Water Reclamation District. That's again going to be the business of your local municipality. Your local sewers are your local municipality, their business. But MWRD needs to work with the municipalities to get to meet their mission of flood control, flood management. So in the instance of lead service lines, that is something that I monitor, and I try to learn to find out where are the bottlenecks, and I do send an email, a memo to my alderman once a year saying, well, at this point, in about every March, these are the bottlenecks. So last March it was procurement. It was taking 9 months in the city of Chicago to hire contractors. So yeah, I mean, those are things that are not necessarily obstacles, but empowered with energy, with this knowledge, you can ask for better and I can ask for better, but it takes more than one voice.
I love the lake. I love the water. I love the lakefront. We're having lakefront erosion from the water. And I've also always been a person who's taken my brothers, my family. We go to the beach a lot, especially when they were small children. I think that it's really important, environmentally, that we consider, how we're treating this land, but also how we're advocating for this land. So you'll hear me use the word advocate, advocate, advocate a lot. So I will say it again 3 times: advocate, advocate, and advocate. So we don't want to continue to wait until we're flooding and then we're asking our state and federal politicians to get us money from FEMA to clean up after the floods, because you've lost those things that are important and near and dear to you. And if I could just be biblical for a moment, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. So we already know what water will do. So it's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool, and we have to have some levels of control on it. So Chicago faces many issues around water sustainability, from our aged infrastructure to the receding shorelines, which we've been talking about. So what are your thoughts on these issues?
Well, the shoreline has been stabilized recently with Army Corps of Engineers. That would be an Army Corps of Engineer project. But we need to be vigilant, because the time between high water and low water is shortening. So not too many years ago, there was such a huge flood that the river was at such a flood stage, and the lake was also high, that they could not open the lock gates to let that raw sewage out into the drinking water supply, which I know that sounds not great, but the alternative in that situation was flooding downtown. Mm-hmm. So flooding downtown with raw sewage is a hard stop no. So the lock operator basically had to pump the locks. So let that sewage out into the lake and then close them real quick before the backsplash came. And this is how he was able to decrease the water level in the lake and save downtown from being flooded. So that's already happening. So projects like increasing the height of the locks are necessary. But at the same time, we can be doing things like taking areas off the combined sewer system as they become available for development, especially on the areas bordering the lake. Lincoln Yards is one of those developments. Somebody else just mentioned a development called 78, which I need to do some research on, but that is reportedly along the lakefront as well. So I love to talk about Domino Sugar redevelopment in New York City. New York City is another old combined sewer system, so if you can find it in another city and they're doing a good job, why can't we do it here? So they have less barriers in their codes and rules than we do. And I am working on that. So, which I'd love to talk to you about that later in just a moment. But this is a situation in New York where on the Brooklyn waterfront, they are taking 11 acres and 5 buildings completely off the old combined sewer system, and they have a decentralized water reclamation system in the basement. And so that portion of land no longer contributes to the combined sewer overflows. They're just taking all of that off the sewer system. And so that's like a little void space now. So all the other neighborhoods behind it have a little bit more buffer room before they would cause an overflow. And that's won national awards. So we could be doing that here, but we've got a lot of bookkeeping to do before we can do that here. We have to revise our plumbing code, which already was revised a couple years ago, so sorry for that. It needs to be done again. And there's also, we're the only state in the United States where water use is illegal, but knock on wood, we could change that this week. So there is a bill in the Senate that could repeal that. So if that happens, we are at the starting line for policy.
So that bill is really important. I know that you've been watching it, and since you mentioned it to me, I took a look at it as well. So these impactful bills, again, is a way that we advocate for our public officials to move this agenda forward. I actually live in an area that's not very far from one of the water reclamations in South Shore. near Rainbow Beach, for those of you who are familiar with that area. So our goal here is to ensure that we have clean drinking water, that we are not flooding, that we have that we are passing legislation that is going to help with the infrastructure. Anything else?
I mean, it does take us all, right? So it does take an educated electorate asking your elected officials to advance sustainability practices and to advocate for funding. So this bill needs to get passed in order for us to even qualify for some of the federal funding, because there in the American Infrastructure Act that was just passed, there's funding specifically for water reuse projects that we just can't do here until that's a legal thing in Illinois.
So one of the ways that we can support what's really important to us is to ensure that when we go to the general election, that we are voting down ballot and looking at those people who are running for the Water Reclamation District. Sharon's seat, when you vote for her, will put her in place for 6 years. That's a lot of time to be impactful. I don't say that it's enough time, because that would take term after term, but that is a great way to get started. It takes it's a lengthy process, and it will take time. And so we have to ensure that we have people in these seats who have the knowledge to push forward these agendas. I am worried about our environment. And week after week, we talk about the sustainability in our environment. This sustainability is important. My basement flooded this past year when the west side and such a large part of the city flooded. Yes, FEMA came in. It did not cover a fraction of the cost of the loss, that I had. I don't want to see anyone going through this. And it's not to say that, by electing 1 or 3 people that it's going to stop the flooding, but we have to have more education around this type of issue. Sharon, are there any other things that you would like to add? You've got some wonderful people who are listening this evening, and you are a great guest, so please share with them those things that you think will be helpful.
Yeah, well, just bringing up the issues in your local town hall meetings is going to be great. So I kind of have a little bit of a legislative goal, 4 different goals that I want to achieve for legislation. So if this bill gets passed in the Senate right now, then it's back to the House because it got revised, and then off to the governor's desk for signing. Now you could ask, why is a water commissioner doing that kind of stuff? But I don't really think that we're going to be electing our state reps and senators for water policy, because I don't know if you've realized, or if you've noticed, the world's on fire lately.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So it really takes the water commissioner focusing on water, working with the state legislature, right? But after this bill is passed, my next priority would be the forever chemicals, the polyfluorinated alkyl substances, right? There is no way forward for those other than a source ban. And that is going to be hard on manufacturing, so it's really going to take a lot of conversation. Maine has done it. They have a phased over multiple year ban in manufacturing, because you have to let the industry you have to give them time to respond, to replace those chemicals in their manufacturing process. But we need to start talking about it now, because if the ban takes 5 years, you better start now rather than 5 years from now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that was 2.
That's 2. And then 3 is, I would just love to see disclosure of lead service lines at property transfer, so that would value your property if you have spent that money to replace your lead service line already. Because the lead service line, the biggest problem and the hurdle that we are facing right now is, again, public education. It always comes back to public education. Empowering the public to ask the right questions and to keep at it, because it takes more than one person, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's your 3, and your 4 is?
And my 4 is just to make sure that there is equal representation geographically for MWRD. But that is far down my list, so I'm going to work on 1, 2, 3 first. So.
Well, equal representation is important to ensure that we're getting people in these seats that have an agenda that's going to be impactful for our community. And when I say our community, I mean anywhere where there is an opportunity for there to be flooding. Everyone drinks water. Everyone uses water. Water is a substance of life. And so I would really like for you to keep in mind that when in November
election, yes.
November
the general
election. Sharon will be running for her seat, and that would be Waller for Water. Waller for Water.
Is a great ballot name.
It's a great ballot name. So I would like to thank you, and I'd like to thank Meadows Eastside, our executive board members, for their sponsorship, and of course, Right Style Beauty Lounge in South Shore for always making sure that my locks are luscious, as well as the talented staff here at CAN TV. Thank you so much for all of the great work that you do. And remember, you can follow Sy's Green Scene on Facebook and YouTube, and you can also email me your suggestions or questions at sysgreenscene@gmail.com. I'd also like for you to be able to contact Sharon, which you can contact her at
Waller4water@gmail.com. And that is also my website. You can go to www.waller4water.com and learn more about sustainability and also a sustainable reading list. Lots of information there, and I'd love to hear from you, right?
Yes. And if I could just ask for you to put Sharon's flyer up one more time so people will have an opportunity to copy any information that is present. So again, that's Sharon Waller, and it's Waller 4 Water. And you can also reach her, and that's at Gmail, and then you can also reach her at her website, Waller4water.com. So again, I want to thank everyone for being a part of our show today, and I especially want to thank you for, navigating the traffic. Thank goodness, it was an easier day today for you to get here and taking the time out to share some time with us about our environment and water.
Okay, and you know what? I'm just going to there's the water in our hands, right?
Water in our hands.
It's our precious water. Thank you, Sy, for all you do.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so very much for showing.